They thought giving her the smallest division would quietly push her out of the company, a slow, invisible exit no one would question. But what they didn't realize was that the worthless department they handed her was the only part of the business holding everything together. And 6 months later, in a room full of executives who once ignored her, not a single person could meet her eyes. What happened next wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. It was precise, calculated, and final. And if you enjoy stories where the quiet ones don't just survive but completely rewrite the rules, make sure you subscribe, because this story might change how you see power. Her name was Celine Carter, and for most people inside Ardent Global, she barely existed. She wasn't loud. She didn't compete for attention. She didn't sit at the center of conversations or interrupt meetings to make herself heard. She observed. She listened. And more importantly, she remembered everything. That's why when the restructuring announcement came, she already knew something was wrong before her name was even mentioned. Ardent Global was expanding aggressively across Europe and North America, but internally things were unstable. Departments were being merged, budgets cut, and people quietly removed under the label of strategic optimization. It sounded clean, professional, necessary. But Celine understood what it really meant. Someone had to lose, so others could gain control. When her name finally appeared on the screen, it wasn't a promotion. It wasn't even neutral. She was reassigned to lead a division most people didn't even remember existed anymore. A fragmented logistics unit buried under years of neglect. No resources. No real authority. And no future. The room barely reacted. A few people exchanged glances. Someone near the back almost smiled. It wasn't just a reassignment. It was a message. You don't matter. Celine didn't argue. She didn't question it. She simply nodded once, closed her notebook, and walked out of the meeting like it didn't affect her. But inside, something shifted. Not anger. Not panic. Something colder. Something quieter. Because what they didn't know was that Celine had spent the last 3 years analyzing internal data flows across every department in the company. Not because it was her job, but because she was curious. Patterns fascinated her. Inefficiencies bothered her. And over time she had noticed something no one else had. The company didn't run on its most profitable divisions. It ran on the one they had just handed to her. At first it didn't look important. The numbers were small. The reports were inconsistent. But when you connected the data across departments, a different picture appeared. This irrelevant logistics unit was quietly supporting multiple high-revenue operations. It wasn't visible in headlines or investor reports. But without it, timelines would collapse, contracts would fail, and revenue streams would break. It wasn't weak. It was hidden. And now it was hers. For the first few weeks, Celine did exactly what they expected. She stayed quiet. She attended meetings. She made small adjustments. Nothing dramatic. Nothing noticeable. Because the biggest mistake people make when they're underestimated is reacting too quickly. Celine wasn't going to make that mistake. Instead, she started mapping everything. Every supplier. Every dependency. Every contract that relied on her division. She didn't rush. She didn't expose anything. She just built a complete picture, piece by piece, until she understood exactly where the real power sat. And then, she waited. If you were in her position, would you fight back immediately, or stay silent and plan something bigger? Comment below. I'm curious what you'd do. 3 months passed and slowly things began to change. But not in ways anyone noticed at first. Celine renegotiated small contracts, adjusted delivery schedules, introduced minor policy changes that looked like routine improvements. On paper, everything seemed normal, efficient even. But behind the scenes, she was doing something far more strategic. She was repositioning control. Every change she made shifted dependency slightly, quietly redirecting key operations to rely more heavily on her division. It was subtle. invisible to executives who only looked at top-line numbers. But at an operational level, the company was becoming increasingly dependent on the very unit they had tried to bury. And still, no one noticed. Except one person, Daniel Reeves, a senior manager known for being observant in ways others weren't. He didn't confront Celine directly. He didn't accuse her of anything. But during one meeting he asked a simple question that most people ignored. Why are so many timelines suddenly routing through logistics? Celine met his gaze calmly. Because it's more efficient. He didn't respond. But he didn't look convinced either. It didn't matter. By then, it was already too late to stop what she had started. Over the next 2 months, the company hit what looked like unexpected friction. Projects slowed down. Deliveries became more complex. Departments that once operated independently started experiencing delays, small at first, then harder to ignore. Executives blamed external factors, market shifts, supply chain issues. But Celine knew the truth. The system wasn't failing. It was revealing its true structure. And then came the board meeting. 6 months after that initial decision, the same people who had dismissed her were now sitting around the table trying to understand why performance metrics were slipping across multiple divisions. The atmosphere was tense, controlled, but fragile. Reports were presented. Data was analyzed. But nothing fully explained the problem. Until Celine spoke. It wasn't loud. It wasn't emotional. It was precise. She stood up, connected her laptop, and projected a simple network map onto the screen. At first it looked like standard operational data. But as she walked them through it, the room slowly went silent. Because for the first time, they could see it. Every major revenue stream, every key operation, every critical timeline, was connected to one central point. Her division. What happened in that room next is something no one there would ever forget. Executives who once ignored her were now asking questions carefully, cautiously. The CEO, who had approved her reassignment without a second thought, leaned forward with a completely different expression. Are you saying, all of this depends on your unit? Celine didn't smile. I'm saying it always did. You just didn't see it. Silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't come from confusion, but from realization. And in that moment, the power dynamic shifted completely. But the real move wasn't the reveal. It was what came after. Celine closed her laptop slowly, looked around the room, and spoke in the same calm tone she had always used. I've already secured independent operational control agreements for every critical process linked to this division. They didn't understand at first, until she clarified. In simple terms, if this unit stops cooperating, most of the company stops functioning. No threats. No raised voice. Just truth. If you've ever been underestimated like this, subscribe. Because moments like this don't happen by accident. They're built quietly over time. The CEO leaned back, processing the situation. For the first time since she had joined the company, he wasn't in control. What do you want? He asked. Celine paused. Not for effect, but because she had already decided months ago. A restructuring, she said. One that reflects actual operational importance, not perceived status. No anger. No revenge speech. Just strategy. And in that moment, they realized something terrifying. She hadn't reacted. She had planned. From the very beginning. The meeting ended differently than it started. Not with decisions being made about her, but with decisions being made because of her. And as Celine walked out of the boardroom, no one laughed. No one underestimated her. Because they finally understood something they should have seen months ago. Power doesn't always sit at the top. Sometimes, it's built quietly, where no one is looking. And by the time you notice it, it's already too late.